Hello, this is video 6, which is about career planning. That includes both resumes and statements of purpose. As you know from the syllabus, you can, for the final component of this course, choose either a resume and cover letter or a statement of purpose to create. So this component of the course is something you're going to work on sort of while you're completing the major assignment for the course, which is, of course, your research paper. The idea with having a career planning component for the course is that, typically this is a course you take as a senior, and we know that you're shortly going to be graduating and thinking about next steps. So while you're finishing up the research component, you're going to also be thinking forward toward those kinds of documents you need to pull together for the next steps, whether that be applying for jobs or applying for graduate school. So in this lecture, I'm going to cover what you'll need to think about and do for those assignments. The assignments we're talking about for the career planning part of the course are assignments 7 and 10. In assignment 7, you're going to sort of do the prep work, which means both completing a career planning worksheet and doing a first draft of either your resume and cover letter or statement of purpose. Again, you get to choose. And then for assignment 10, it'll be the final version of, again, either the resume and cover letter or the statement of purpose. Okay. So you're going to start with the worksheet. And this is that career plan worksheet. Again, it's part of assignment 7. And what I'm asking you to do in that worksheet is to think about where you want to end up in the future. Okay. What kind of job do you want to be doing in the year 2036? That date is chosen because it's far enough out into the future that by then you will have been able to either complete further education or further training, go through the sort of entry-level positions that all of us have to sort of start with and sort of make your way into sort of the heart of a career, right? So again, the key here is not to think about what do I want to be doing the day after I graduate or the year after I graduate, but where do I want to end up in about 12 years, right? That means you can start now to plan out the steps that you need to take to get yourself to that career in the future, okay? So as you'll see on the worksheet, these are the things I'm asking you about on the worksheet. The kinds of things you want to be thinking about in terms of that future career are not only sort of, the kind of job it is or the kind of fields, which are also important, but also what kinds of work do you want to be doing, right? Those kinds of issues are really important for deciding on a career. Do you, want to be working on your own or working as part of a team? Is location important to you, right? Do you want to be in a major city or do you not, right? Or does that not matter to you? Do you want to be in the United States or do you want to be somewhere else? What kind of an advancement timeline are you interested in? Do you want the kind of position where, you know exactly what the sequence is to work up in that field, or is that not as important to you? Okay. So again, you're going to fill out this worksheet to get you thinking about what you want for the future so that then you can start to plan on how to get there. So once you fill out that worksheet, then that next step will be, well, how do you get to that, right? Do you, for example, need more education, right? If the career you planned out for yourself is something that you cannot get with a bachelor's degree, right? That it requires a master's or it requires a PhD, then you know that part of your plan needs to be getting those degrees, right? If it's not something that requires particular extra degrees, is it something that requires certain kinds of training, right? Do you need to make sure you have certain kinds of technical expertise? Is it something that they really just, that kind of career, what you need is to gain many years of experience? And if so, can you get those entry-level jobs with a bachelor's degree? Do you need to start working as a volunteer, etc., right? So again, we're focusing on the longer-term goal and figuring out what you need to do for the next 10 to 12 years to get to that, right? Once you know what all those things are, then you can also start to map out a more specific sequence, right? How many years of experience do you need? If you need a degree, how many years does it take to complete that, etc., so that you know sort of what you're up against. And also, again, so you know what the sort of pattern of your life will look like for the years to come. So again, this is sort of trying to figure out an overall plan as opposed to going from year to year, figuring out, well, what am I going to do next year? What am I going to do the year after that? What am I going to do this year? What am I going to do that year? Instead, if you have an overarching plan, you know, I'm in this part of my work towards that ultimate goal, okay? Once you've done this, a really useful thing to do is to start looking for actual job ads, like real job ads being posted right now that reflect the goal, the career goal that you're after. So in other words, I'm talking about not the jobs that you can get right now, but jobs that are the career position you want in, say, 10 years, right? So the reason to do that is you start to, again, get an image of what all the things are that you need to do to get to that, all right? There's lots of places to find postings for those kinds of positions, right? Like the sort of middle and upper level positions that you might ultimately want to be in. I've given you a few examples here on this slide, and I will also be posting this PowerPoint to D2L so you can look at those links again. One good place to look for job postings is in professional organizations' websites. Many sort of professional fields or industries have organizations that are sort of a meeting place for all the people in that particular line of work. And the websites that service those organizations often also have job postings, right? So this one is for, the field that I happen to be in, which is anthropology. So this is the website for the American Anthropological Association and their job board. I know you may very well not want to be an anthropologist. So again, this is just an example. But for whatever your preferred career area is, look for the professional organizations attached to that career, to that field or that career area. And see what they have in terms of job postings. Again, most of them will have something along those lines. There are other kinds of, actually, here's another one of those sort of professional organizations. This is one for, this is an organization for people who work in museums, right? So again, just a different example in a different field area, right? So if you want to know, like, well, what are the kinds of jobs that you can get in museums, right? Whether as a curator or something else, here's where you can look. So again, if you know that you want to do that, you can figure out, here's what I need, right? Here's the training, here's the years of experience, and here's what I can expect from those jobs. There's other kinds of sites that you can find online that are not exactly professional organizations, but might be, again, places where the jobs of a certain sort or in a certain area are posted. This is a site of all the U.S. government jobs, right? It's called USA Jobs. So if you think you're interested in working for the government, this is a place to look. And then I also included in this list some sort of other kinds of things. This is for non-governmental organizations. So a lot of these will be for nonprofit organizations and things like that. Some of them are sort of full-time, long-term jobs. Other of them are sort of more like temporary project-based positions. If you know that you want to work for, say, a humanitarian organization or work abroad in those kinds of fields, this would be a place to look. And then the final reference on here, I didn't bother to include the link because you can access it through Newport. You know that Northeastern has allows all students access to a service called Handshake. I'm sure you've received emails about it. That is a way to find internships, right? And internships can be also a great way to get experience and references relevant to your ultimate career goals. So that's another place to look, is on Handshake. Okay, so thinking then about the documents that you are ultimately going to produce for this part of the course, right? Either the resume and cover letter or the statement of purpose. If you really want to do both, you could, but it makes more sense to focus on one for now. Whether and the way you choose that would really depend on, is your next step after graduating from Northeastern to start applying for jobs, or is your next step after graduating from Northeastern going to be to start applying to graduate programs, okay? So make your choice based on that. Whichever direction you're planning on going, the best place to start to understand the finer points of these documents that you're going to produce is to read the Purdue OWL selections that are the part of the readings for this unit, right? They're on the syllabus, and they're also links to them posted in D2L. So there's one that's about resumes and cover letters, and there's one about statements of purpose, okay? So definitely make sure you start by reading those assigned Purdue OWL readings, okay, which have a lot of great information about really what these things should look like, okay? So that said, right, assuming that you are going to read the Purdue OWL items, here's just some highlights of things to think about as you're putting together these documents. I'm going to start with the resume, right? You may very well already have a resume, which is great. If you've already started on it or you already have a working resume that you use, then what you'll be doing, and you want to work on that document for this assignment, then what you'll be doing is working on really revising, updating, and polishing your resume. Okay, resumes can always be made better, so if you already have one, work on making it the best resume you can have, okay? So a resume is typically one page. I said 1 to 2 here. There's a little bit of flexibility there, but the sort of standard is that it's a one-page document. So it's very, very brief, right? So one of the real important things to do in a resume is to very succinctly cover the most important things that you can about yourself to give the reader a good, clear snapshot of who you are and what you already have done and know how to do and what your potential is, okay? It's going to include some really mundane stuff like your contact info. It's also going to include an objective or goal statement. This is really important. The best way to frame that statement that goes at the top of a resume is to use specific language from the job you're applying to, right? You may have some generic objective statements that you keep on the back burner that you can use or modify over time, but the best approach is to update and tailor your resume to the specific job you're applying to, okay? So you want to use language from the job ad that you're responding to make the connection between what's on your resume and the position that this organization is trying to fill. For the education part of a resume, obviously you're going to have the big items like your degree, right? A BA in Global Studies from Northeastern Illinois University, for example. You can also include your GPA and certainly if you have a minor or something like that, right? So definitely include the sort of the formal part of stating your degrees. I encourage you to also include a bit more content about what you did. If you did any special projects, right? If you did, for example, a capstone paper or a thesis or any other sort of bigger level assignments that are worth mentioning and that go to your career goals, you can list those. If there's specific relevant coursework, for example, if you did a cluster of 5 different courses all about international human rights, and you're interested in applying to work at an NGO that focuses on human rights, that would be a way to highlight that within your degree, you did specific work that's relevant to the position, all right? So there's no quick and easy formula for how you do that. It's more that you need to sort of creatively think about ways to let the reader know what the nature of your work on your degree is. If you reduce it just to one line, right? BA in Global Studies, Northeastern Illinois, 2024, that's a good credential, but the reader may not have a very good idea of what that means and what you studied, right? So you want to help them understand who you are and what you've done. Another major section of the resume is your experience section. This typically involves, the work, the positions you've had, the work jobs, right? But you can also expand it to include volunteer work, community service, if you've done sort of field work, anything like that, right? Anything where you had responsibilities that you think are relevant to what you're applying for. So in other words, if you're going to do, add all those different kinds of things, then you might want to call that category experience, right? Instead of work experience. It really depends on exactly what you've done. But it doesn't just have to be, typical paid jobs. It can be these other kinds of things as well. again, especially if they're relevant. So in other words, you may have been paid in a position to work, say, in a restaurant, and that job may or may not be really relevant to what you want to do, but you have a volunteer position, right, or an internship that is really relevant, all right? So don't make the distinction be just what you got paid for. Any kind of relevant experience can go into this section. Skills are also a category you can list. For this, it should really be things that are directly relevant to what you're applying for, okay? So if certain computer skills are relevant to the job, then list them. If not, it's not necessarily, important. It's not just, it shouldn't just be a generic category. If you did a lot of research or writing, if you had leadership positions, right? Things like that can go in the skills section. And then finally, you can also add honors, right? Like awards you've received. It can include things like hobbies and interests, only if they are directly relevant to what you're applying for, okay? So, if you're interested in watching old films, that's great, but don't put it on your resume unless you're applying for a job working in a film archive at a library, right? So the main point I'm trying to get across here is that there's some very kind of standard categories typically on a resume. So we all sort of have the same basic categories on our resumes. However, you want to make sure you tailor your resume both to your own experience and to the position you're applying for, okay? So within those limitations of the format of a resume, make it work for you, okay? So make some good, use your own judgment to make some good decisions about what should and shouldn't be included. So some sort of overall points then about the resume. So again, keep in mind what you're trying to do here, right? So don't think of it just as it's a list of stuff I've done. It is that, but you have certain goals for what that list does for you and how it's received by other people. You want to be showcasing your knowledge, skills, and abilities. Because your knowledge, skills, and abilities change over time, you want to therefore tailor it to a specific position, right? So don't just have one resume that you send to everybody, right? Make sure that it connects as much as you can make it do so to a specific job you're applying for. And then also think about how it's organized. Yes, there are some real standards, but there are a few options for how you organize a resume. You can do everything just in chronological order, or you could organize it by certain kinds of functions that you may have played or certain kinds of skill sets. So again, see the examples in the Purdue OWL material that I assigned for this unit, which gives you examples of what those differently organized kinds of resumes look like. This is the link to where within the stuff you are reading for Purdue OWL, where they actually give sample resumes, which is also a certain super useful part of this reading you're doing in the Purdue OWL. So they actually show you sort of what it looks like, right? So if you want to see a chronological resume, here is what one looks like, right? So if you already have a resume, I'm not saying you have to make it look exactly like this, but this will just give you an idea of, a way to do it, right? If you haven't written a resume, this is a great resource, but even if you have, it'll show you, again, some options and some of the sort of important principles you want to keep in mind as you work on your own document. Design in resumes is also really important. Again, you'll see some of that in the examples you see in the Purdue OWL. One of the reasons for the importance of design in the resume is that a resume is a document that is, by definition, going to be skimmed super fast by the people who read it, right? Nobody receiving a resume is going to take hours to carefully read every word. Usually, somebody who's reading a resume is reading your resume in a stack of 50 others, right? So you need it to be very readable, meaning somebody can quickly glance at your resume and pick up the most important information. That means certain things for design, right? It needs to be very simple and clean. You don't want to have lots of complicated fonts. You don't want to have colors, right? You want it to be sort of very minimalist for the most part in terms of the way that it is presented. It needs to be a very easily readable font. It can be something like Times New Roman, or it can be one of the other fonts, but don't have, again, hard to read fonts. There's some fonts, for example, that look like cursive script. Those are not a good choice for a resume, right? You want something that somebody can glance at and quickly read it, and you don't want 1,000 different fonts. 1 or 2 is the max. Parallelism means that each of the sections of the resume you want to be organized in the same way, and all the items within that section need to be parallel, meaning grammatically parallel. So if you have, a list of, skills, if you want, if they're all, they should either all be nouns or all be adjectives or all be phrases, right? Like, make sure that somebody, again, can easily move through it by making the different components parallel to one another. Working in quadrants is also a good way to think about your design. You see this sort of red plus sign on the page. That's indicating sort of how to think about the quadrants. And the idea with quadrants is that you want to have a sort of similar amount of text in all 4 quadrants, right? You want to spread the information out evenly across the page. You don't want to end up with a resume where all the information is all on one side, like running down the left-hand margin, and there's big blank spots on the right side, right? So space things out. You want to tab things across the page so that you have, again, evenly distributed information. And then finally, another really important way to organize it and help the reader move through it quickly is to use emphasis. That means for example, some fonts are bigger. Some are bolded or underlined or italicized, right? So that when I look at this, I'm not just seeing, undifferentiated text. I'm seeing organization. So I'm seeing through the use of, again, size or bold or whatever, I'm seeing, oh, there's different categories, right? And I know exactly what this category is. And then I can tell from the way it's formatted that these are the items that go under this category, right? So you're going to sort of telegraph the organizational scheme through your use of those kinds of elements. Okay. Now, a resume is always accompanied by a cover letter. So as part of the assignment for this course, you're also going to write a cover letter. Cover letters are very brief, so it's not that you need to sort of do a bunch of writing, but it is important that you have a formal, sort of well-written, well-edited cover letter to accompany your resume. It may very well be that your cover letter is something that goes as an email, right? But either way, you want it to be sort of a professional letter. So again, you're going to use the language from the job ad, right? It's tailored. Don't have a generic cover letter, or you can have a generic one, but then sort of add some stuff that's specific to the job you're applying to. Make sure you use formal headings as in any other job letter, right? You can look online if you need to know what a typical job letter looks like. And again, also look at the Purdue OWL, which in addition to talking about resumes, talks about job letters. You want to, again, be formal, right? Dear so-and-so, or, to the search committee, or whatever it may be, right? You want to talk about where you found the job that you're applying for. And you want to very, very briefly highlight the qualifications that make you a very strong candidate for that job, right? You're really in the cover letter just making a very brief argument that you're a good fit. You're not going to repeat everything that's in your resume. They're going to read the resume too, right? So don't get bogged down in listing tons of accomplishments, but pique their interest, right? Say something overall about how you are an excellent candidate and a good fit for the job, all right? So again, a cover letter is very brief, but it's still an opportunity to get your application forwarded to the shortlist. So don't waste that opportunity by making your cover letter a throwaway, right? Use it as an opportunity to highlight who you are, why you're the best candidate, and why they should read your resume. That's the other piece of it. The cover letter in some ways is sort of a teaser. most of the information they need is in your resume, encourage them to read it by having an excellent cover letter accompanying it. You will typically also include references either on a resume or with a resume. Sometimes folks will say, references available on request. So depending on the kind of position that you're applying to. It's important, though, in advance of a job search to set up people who can be references for you, right? Identify who those people are. Let them know, hey, I'm applying for jobs. I'd like to use you as a reference. See if they're willing to do so, and prepare your referees, right? If you're going to apply to 50 jobs and you're going to put this person's name down, first you want to ask permission of that person. Like, is it okay if I use you as a reference? And let them know that you're doing a major job search and that they will probably be contacted, right? If it's something where your reference needs to write an actual letter, right, which is the case with some kinds of jobs, then you also want to make sure you give the person as much information as possible about what you've applied for and provide them with ample time to create that letter, okay? That's probably more likely going to be the case if you're applying for graduate school, right? When you apply for graduate school, you definitely are going to need to get several people to write letters for you. So again, giving people some time to pull those together and write the strongest letters possible for you is really important. You want to help them to help you be the strongest candidate possible. Okay. Whoops. So the other option you have for this assignment is to write a statement of purpose. So this would be the key document you would produce if you are planning to apply to graduate school. So I want to talk a little bit about the context, right, for thinking about pursuing graduate training, and then also talk a little bit about what that statement of purpose should look like. And again, if you're going to go this direction, make sure you read the Purdue OWL materials that I linked to on D2L, which have a lot of great information and examples of what a statement of purpose is and what it should do, okay? So if you are thinking about graduate training because you've looked, for example, at the job postings, as we talked about earlier, and you found like, hey, like most of the jobs that I'm kind of interested in, like they all say you must have a master's degree or that you must have something, right? Then you want to sort of start as early as possible, really thinking about what that might look like, right? First of all, what kind of a graduate degree is it? Is it a master's degree? Is it a PhD? Is it a law degree? Is it a business degree, right? There's lots of options. Is it some kind of graduate certificate, right? There's even shorter versions of graduate training. So figuring out, again, what kind of graduate training you might want to pursue and why. Not just like, oh, it seems like a fun thing to do, but I can see how it leads to the kind of job I want, right? You can also think about, when do I want to do this? It is not the case that you need to go directly from your undergraduate training to your graduate training, right? There's lots of people that take time off in between, and it's a perfectly good thing to do, depending on your plans, okay? But these are some of the sort of initial things you want to think about. Once you sort of start to get an idea of that, you need to also just look at a bunch of programs. You're not going to apply to all of them, but at least reading about them online is really important, right? So, looking at the website for graduate programs, which will tell you all kinds of stuff about both what their topics are and who the faculty are that work there, what their specialties are, how long it takes, what the courses are like, what the practical elements are like, all that stuff. So spending a bunch of time just online reading through different options, right, to give yourself a sense of what it's like, and then to identify the ones that seem the most promising is really important, right? So you'll be looking, as you sort of scroll through different programs, you'll be looking for, well, what are the different sort of fields or subjects that these different graduate programs address? Who are these faculty? Who are the people who are going to be training me? What are their specialties? Like, are the faculty at this particular university that I'm looking at, are they working on the stuff that I'm interested in, or are they working on something else, right? At a particular university, what kind of resources do they have, right? Do they have, lots of, people working on a certain subject, or a great library, or lots of, job training options or whatever, right? As you think about graduate school, you also immediately have to start thinking about funding, right? How much would it cost? Is there a lot of scholarship money or fellowship money available? Can I work as a TA and get my tuition waived, et cetera, et cetera? And finally, student success. Most websites for graduate programs will have something about what their graduates go on to do. If they don't, you can always contact them. They will always have contact information. Learn more about the program, things like that. I would want to know, well, tell me what's happened with these people who have done this degree. Where are they now, right? So finding out sort of what a particular degree does for people and what it leads them to is also a really great way to know if it's a good fit for you. So once you've gotten that far, right, you figured out that you do want to go to graduate school, you have a sense of sort of which of the programs seem most promising. The application to graduate school is often something that involves sort of a bunch of different components. This is sort of a basic list here, but of course the best way to find out is to look at the list of required application materials on a program that you're interested in, right? Usually there'll be forms you fill out. You'll be sending transcripts, of course, right? I put here, a question about grades and GPAs. Some graduate programs will say right on the website, you need to have a GPA of X amount or greater. Some won't. It depends, right? Grades are important, but I wouldn't not apply just based on the grades issue. If you can make an argument for the fact that you're a strong candidate, whether you have great grades or not, I think it's worth applying, right? But know that if your grades are lower, if your GPA is lower, then you'll need to think about talking about why perhaps your grades are not as high as they could be, but these are all the things you have to offer, okay? Many graduate schools will require you to take some kind of test, whether it's the GRE, which is a kind of general one, or something more specific like the LSAT. So again, finding out what tests are required and leaving yourself time to take those tests and do well on them is also really important. Scores are different in different ways, right? And again, for some programs, they're going to be more important. For others, they're going to be less important. It's not uncommon for test scores to be tied to certain funding opportunities, so it's definitely worth trying to do as well as possible on those tests, all right? Letters of recommendation, right? I mentioned earlier that getting references is really important. For applying to graduate school, you're definitely going to need letters of recommendation. Typically, they will say a certain percentage of those, like if they ask for 2 letters or 3 letters, you need 1 or 2 that are from professors who have worked with you. Maybe another could be from a job or something else. Very important to make sure you identify people who know you well enough and have seen you excel such that they can write a strong letter of recommendation for you, right? So think about who the folks are who might be good letter writers. Approach them early, let them know what you're working on. And then again, when you are ready to apply, make sure you give folks lots of information and time to write you a good letter. Some applications will also ask for writing samples. Think about, again, a strong piece of writing that you produced for a course, typically a course during your bachelor's degree, that can play that role, right? Bigger assignments, but particularly assignments that you feel like are sort of very well pulled together or are directly connected to what you want to do in graduate school, are especially good candidates. And then finally, last but certainly not least, the application to graduate school always is going to ask you for a statement of purpose, right? This is sort of the typically something like 2 to 3 page little essay, which is where you present yourself and what you want to do and why they should accept you into the program. It is by far the most important element of your graduate school application. The statement of purpose is the part you should spend the most time on and really needs to be well thought out and well polished. So again, that's why for this assignment, for this course, that is the other option you can choose. If you don't want to do the resume and cover letter, you can do a statement of purpose for applying to graduate school. So again, the statement of purpose is not the entire application process, but it's the sort of crown jewel of the graduate school application, the most important part. So, I already talked about letters of recommendation a little bit and the need to plan ahead. But let's move on to the statement of purpose, right? So if you do decide to go in that direction, again, definitely read the Purdue OWL, which will give you more information. But here in sum is what the statement of purpose is and what it should do, right? Your statement of purpose is going to explain why you are applying to that graduate program and what you plan to do during your time as a graduate student and afterward. So really how you will use your time as a graduate student to become a sort of successful part of that field, right? Pursue a career in that field. So you're talking both about what you plan to do in the immediate term and your potential to become a part of that career field, okay? So you're going to use this statement of purpose, which again is not very long. It's typically 2 pages around that, right? You're going to explain what you've done already, right? So what you've done up to now, how what you've done has led you to want to apply to that graduate program, and how all of those experiences that you've gained, the skills you've gained, the credentials, things like a degree you've completed, make you an excellent candidate and an excellent fit for that program, right? So again, it's not generic. Just like I said, a resume is sort of a general thing, but then you're going to tweak it and tailor it to each job. It's the same with the statement of purpose. You're not just saying, I'm great, look at all my accomplishments. You're saying, I'm great, look at all my accomplishments, and here's how my accomplishments are very well suited to what your graduate program is interested in and does, and here's how I'm going to direct all my abilities toward being an excellent student and ultimately being, having a successful career in this area, right? So again, be as specific as you can about your fit with their program, all right? So I think the statement of purpose is really about sort of a past, present, and future orientation. You're going to make this argument about how your past, present, and future are tied and are heading in a direction that is a good fit for what this particular graduate program does. All right. So, this does not mean going back to childhood, right? Like you don't need to talk about how for your entire life you wanted to do this. But it does mean being specific, particularly about what you've done as an undergraduate, right? Meaning not only, I did this particular degree or I did this particular major, but, I've studied these things. I've learned this language. I've done this internship. I wrote a paper about this topic, whatever it may be. And here's how all those things connect to my goals for what I'm going to do while I'm in graduate school and what I'm going to do afterwards, right? So you want to tie your plans to what this program has to offer, right? If that program has certain emphases, certain strengths, if there's certain faculty there who work on certain issues, making those connections. I want to do the things that you already do, right? Or that you are known for, or that you're particularly excellent at. That's why I'm choosing this program. Those kind of connections are really key, right? Graduate programs want excellent students, of course, but they also want purposeful students who have thought carefully about their plans, and who are sort of making a good choice, not just to go to graduate school in general, but to try to go to that specific graduate program, okay? So again, the more specific you can be, the better. In this process, in this class, in GS 399, you're going to be first turning in a sort of initial draft of, again, either your resume or your statement of purpose, and then a final draft. So again, if you can't get all of this sort of perfectly accomplished in your first draft, that's the point of doing 2 drafts, right? So try to be as specific as possible, and then in the feedback I give you, I can also help you make it more tailored and more specific for the final version. Okay, so, again, those are sort of, this is the overview of what you want to be thinking about and working on for the career planning component of the course, which runs for the last few weeks of the semester. The 2 assignments, specifically assignments that are connected to this part of the course, are assignment 7 and assignment 10. So make sure you look at those, on the syllabus and submit them by the dates that are on there. And again, you're doing this sort of in parallel to completing the major work of the course, which is your final research paper. So good luck. We're very near the end of the semester. I know there's a lot going on. Good luck finishing all these projects up. And of course, if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to get in touch. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.